To say how very delighted and honored I am to stand in this great cathedral and in this great pulpit and be a part of this worship service this morning. I certainly want to express my deep and sincere gratitude to my dear and abiding friend, Bishop Pike, and to Dean Bartlett, and all of the other persons who work in such a noble manner here for extending the invitation for me to come. I cannot stand in this pulpit this morning and in the city of San Francisco, without expressing my deep and abiding appreciation to all of the persons who took time out of their busy schedules, both clergymen and laymen, to come to Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, to be a part of our mighty struggle there for freedom and justice. As I've said so often, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And one cannot stand idly by in any community, however far it may be from the particular area of struggle, and not be concerned. And I'm so happy that there were concerned people in this area of the country who came in large numbers to make a witness for freedom and justice. Racial injustice is still the Negro's burden and America's shame. And we will never rise to our full maturity as a nation. And we will never realize the American dream until we can remove this terrible cancer from the body politic. And this, after all, is what the whole struggle is about. It is not just a lot of noise and needless marching, but it is at bottom a struggle to establish a reign of justice and a rule of love all over this nation and in every community. And we know this morning, as we stand and sit bare under the scrutiny of God, that no section of our country can boast of clean hands in the area of brotherhood. And we are challenged to work with renewed vigor, with passionate determination to make brotherhood a reality. And so I just wanted to say a word of thanks and to express my personal appreciation and that of all those who work with me for the financial and the moral support that we have received from this area of the country. I need not remind you that our struggle is very difficult and it's very costly. And it is always a big lift and a deep source of encouragement when friends of goodwill will send us financial support to keep our struggle going and to keep our staff moving in areas all over the South in order to make the right to vote a reality for all of the deprived Negroes of that area. But I did not come here this morning to talk about civil rights I came as a minister of the gospel to preach a sermon in this great and beautiful cathedral. And I certainly want to commend you for the completion of this beautiful, lasting cathedral. And the first, I understand, of the major Episcopal cathedrals to be completed in our nation. So it is an additional joy to me. It is not up on one side and down on the other, but it is complete on all sides. Now John is saying something quite significant here. And so often we look upon the book of Revelation as a difficult book, puzzling to decode. And certainly we accept everything in the book of Revelation as a record of actual historical occurrences. It is a difficult book shrouded with impenetrable mysteries. But if we will look beneath the peculiar jargon of the author, what biblical theologians would call the prevailing apocalyptic symbolism, we will find in the book of Revelation many eternal truths which forever confront us. And one such truth is the truth of this text. For what John is really saying is this, that life at its best and life as it should be is a life that is complete on all sides. And so there are three dimensions of any complete life to which we can fitly give the words of our text, length, breadth, and height. Now the length of life, as we shall use it here, is not its longevity, not its duration, not how long it lasts. It is the push of a life forward to achieve its own personal ends and ambitions. It is the inward concern for one's own welfare. The breadth of life, as we shall use it here, is the outward concern for the welfare of others, and the height of life is the upward reach for God. These are the three dimensions of any complete life. And unless these three are concatenated, working harmoniously together, one fails to live a complete life. Now let us begin with the length of life. Called him at this particular moment in history to do it. He must put his heart and his soul in it. He must seek to develop his inner powers in a brilliant manner. No matter how small it may be according to the world's standards, he must see that it has cosmic significance if it is for the upbuilding of humanity. He must come to see that whatever he is called to do has significance if it is for the making of a better world. So if you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley. But be the best little scrub on the side of the rail. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are. And this determined push to the end of self-realization, this inward drive to develop one's inner powers, is the length of a man's life. But don't stop here. Some people never get beyond this first dimension of life. They develop their inner powers brilliantly, and they so often end up with all of the inner capacity that the world admires. But they live as if nobody else lives in the world but themselves. They see other people as mere steps by which they climb to their own personal ends and ambitions. If they manage to love anybody, it is little more than a utilitarian love. They love only those people that at times we say they probably didn't stop because that we are facing in our country today. Everybody knows about this crisis. It is known in every home. It is known in every city and every village. Everybody knows that there is a social revolution taking place in our nation today. But in a real sense, the crisis in race relations can be attributed to the fact that there are still too many of our white brothers who are concerned about the length of life rather than the breadth of life, concerned about their preferred economic positions, their political power and dynasties, their social status, their so-called way of life. And if only they would substitute, or rather add, breadth to length, if only they would add the other regarding dimension to the self-regarding dimension, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. One day all men and women of this nation must come to see that God made all of us to live together as brothers, that somehow every man must respect the dignity and worth of human personality, and ultimately a man must be judged not on the basis of the color of his skin, but the content of his character. Somewhere we must discover the world over that we must learn to live together as brothers, or we will all perish together as fools. The problem of Alabama today, the problem of Mississippi today, the problem of the hardcore South today is the fact that these particular states are concerned about preserving an old order which cannot survive in a day of democratic equalitarianism. They talk about states' rights. They want to live somehow on an isolated island cut off from the mainstream of humanity in our nation, forgetting that even if states' rights are valid, and I believe in states' rights, but no state must have the right to do wrong. Every state must ultimately come to see that as it goes around its independent pursuits, its pursuits within the realm of length, that ultimately it must be surrounded by the breath of the nation. And that breath must have with it a concern for all people in the nation, and above all for the federal government. I think this problem also, this question of breath, has a great deal of relevance on the international scale. People suffer in other nations. They suffer poverty, they suffer man's inhumanity to man. And if we are to live creatively in the future, we must be concerned about our brothers all over the world. For the length, or rather the breadth of life, means in the final analysis that no individual and no nation can live alone. Mrs. King and I journeyed to that great country of India not too long ago. I never will forget the experience. It was a marvelous experience to meet and talk with the great leaders of India. It was a marvelous experience to talk and meet thousands and even millions of people. And I started thinking about the fact that we spend millions of dollars a day to store surplus food. And I said to myself, I know where we can store that food free of charge. In the wrinkled stomachs of the millions of God's children in Asia and Africa, South America, and in our own nation who go to bed hungry at night. All I'm saying is simply this, that all life is interrelated. And we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an island in time of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And he goes on toward the end to say, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. Therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. A mastery of this, a recognition of this, means that one has mastered the breath of life. And so by seeing the church so often as a tail light rather than a headlight, as an echo rather than a voice, they become disappointed. They lose a little faith. And then there are those who find it difficult to square their intellectual worldviews and their scientific doctrines with what they consider the sometimes unscientific dogmas of religion. These are the individuals who, because of theoretical denials, find it difficult to pursue this third dimension. But I suspect that the vast majority of people are in another category altogether. They have not denied the existence of God with their lips. With their minds, they deny the existence of God with their lives. They become so busy in other things that they forget God. The secularism and the materialism of our days tend to hover over them, and soon they engulf them. And they end up going a whole day's journey not knowing that God is not with them. But in spite, I do believe we shall overcome. That is another stanza that is often missed, but it is a part of the first stanza. The Lord will see us through. The Lord will see us through someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. Before the victory is won, some of us will get scarred up a bit. Before the victory for brotherhood is won, we will have to face more crowded and frustrated in jail cells. Before the victory is won, maybe somebody else will have to face physical death. But if physical death is the price that some must pay to free their children and their white brothers from a permanent death of the spirit, then nothing can be more redemptive. We shall overcome. We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed earth will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when every valley shall be exalted and every mountain and hill will be made low. The rough places will be made plain and the crooked places straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. So I say to you this morning, go out, love yourself. If that means rational and healthy self-interest, you are commanded to do that. That is the length of life. Go out also and